Rekindling is a normal spell card that can special summon as many fire monsters with 200 defense from your graveyard. This kind of AoE revival effect is generally only seen in banned cards, and this one is not even a once per turn. In this video, we're going to go over the best cards that Rekindling can revive, starting with the ones that were good by themselves, and then going over the cards that actually saw competitive play. Starting us off at number 10, we have Hazy Flame Cerbereus. This is a level 6 fire monster that can be normal summon without a tribute, but then its original attack becomes 1000 instead of 2000. It cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects, and when it's destroyed, you can add a Hazy card from your deck to your hand. The Hazy Flames were a series of level 6 monsters that all couldn't be targeted that were released in the early Xyz era. This wouldn't have been so bad if they could all be normal summoned like Cerberus, but unfortunately most of them relied on the archetypal spells to come out instead. The deck's most powerful play was spamming out level 6 monsters with the Hazy Flame Periton, possibly the only good card in the deck. The rank 6 pull was incredibly good for the time, with great removal in Gauntlet Launcher and even a negate with Photon Strike Bouncer, but unfortunately not good enough to make it worth filling your deck with bricky high level monsters. Periton can be used to bring out a couple of other Hazy Flames straight from the deck, and this is where Rekindling synergy comes in. Both Cerberus and Hydra are fires with 200 defense, so you could, for example, pop your opponent's field with Shogi Rook and then bring them both back to go into something like Hazy Flame Balustrades afterwards. A good play in theory, but not nearly good enough to earn this deck more than a single solitary top throughout the years. But at least the Hazy Flames managed to be a bit more competitively viable in Duel Links. They benefited from the lower level of the format, as well as being able to end on some of the most powerful extra decks in the game, such as Beatrice and Rhinocebus, which offered turned-ending disruptions in Duel Links, which was pretty rare in that game. With that said, builds were usually centered around Hazy Flame Sphinx, which needs most of your deck to be fire monsters to work, so Rekindling wasn't ran anyways. And at number 9, we have Red Resonator. This is a level 2 Fiend Tuner that lets you special summon a level 4 lower monster from your hand with normal summon. Also, when it's special summoned, you can target one monster in the field to gain life points equal to its attack. Cards with this sort of effects have seen quite a bit of play throughout the years, mostly in the Xyz era, with monsters like Goblin Birch and Tin Goldfish to spam rank 4 monsters. Red Resonator was unique in that it provided you with a tuner, letting it see some splash play throughout the years in decks that had starters that triggered on any kind of summon, such as Armageddon Knight. This allowed you to tap into the Synchro 6 pull easily at the very least, which is pretty good to gain advantage from cards such as Coral Dragon and Charge Warrior, which can draw you more cards. This card unfortunately didn't have any level 6 that really comboed well until several years later though, with Red Rising Dragon, which can bring back Red Resonator to give you a life point boost and even climb into a level 8 Synchro. A decent play if it had come out alongside Red, but a pretty terrible one in the middle of Master Rule 4. Especially since it also locked into Dark Synchros for the turn. This card did also have a niche in Duel Links due to the smaller deck size and accompanying skill for consistency, as well as having both Red Rising and Red Resonator available together. In either case though, even if this card was pretty decent, it didn't see play alongside Rekindling. Even if there are quite a few Pyro Synchros with 200 defense, you could climb into this card and then use Rekindling for a bomb. Their levels didn't work too well with Red Resonator, which would often be your only main deck target for it in both Resonator and decks that just splashed it in. And at number 8, we have Jurrac Aeolo. This is a level 1 dinosaur tuner that contributes itself to special summon a level 4 lower Jurrac monster from your graveyard. An effect that's probably never been used in a competitive match, since the only other Jurrac that ever saw play was Jurrac Guobai many years before Aeolo rose in the meta. The reason why this card is used in dinosaur decks is because of Miscellaneousaurus, whose graveyard effect lets you summon a dinosaur monster from your deck by banishing other dinosaurs from your graveyard, including itself. If you only had Misk itself to banish, Aeolo was the best target to bring out due to also being a tuner. This allowed dinosaur decks to go into level 5 Synchros with their main monster, which usually would be High Speed Roy Chanbara for OTKs, and if there was extra fodder on the field, they can go into Trishula instead. It was a staple in all dino decks due to being clearly the best one of the 3 total level 1 dinosaur monsters that existed at the time. Later on, this card would get another niche with Crushed on Halki Fibrax, since it allowed dino decks to go full Halk combo by just normal summoning Oviraptor and searching Misk. Unfortunately though, soon after that, Jurrac Aeolo would get dethroned by Adamandored Archosaur, another level 1 dinosaur which wasn't a tuner, but could destroy your babies in hand, as well as search you double evolution pill. This card also saw no play together with Rekindling, and is possibly the one on this list with the least reason to. The only other dinosaur target is Hazy Flame Hydra, a monster that wasn't very good in Hazy Flame decks in 2013 already, much less in Dino decks way later. And at number 7, we have Flame Bufferlo. This is a level 3 Cyberus monster with 1400 attack, and its effect is that if it leaves the field, you can discard a Cyberus monster to draw 2 cards on a hard once per turn. Bufferlo saw lots of play through the years as one of the best normal summons in Salamangreat decks. Due to being a low-level Cyberus monster, you can link it off into Salamangreat Baelinks, which allows you to then chain block the effect to protect it from Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. The cost also works extremely well with Salamangreats, since most of them want to be in the graveyard anyways, such as Spinny and Jack Jaguar being able to come back for free. And if you do discard a Salamangreat for it, it also allows you to trigger the best card in the deck, Salamangreat Gazelle, since it can special summon itself when an Archetype monster is sent to the graveyard anyway. The Salamangreat Archetype actually has multiple other fire monsters with 200 defense, which could also be Rekindling targets, such as Salamangreat Fennec, Coyote, and Fowl. Funnily enough, there was even a variant of Salamangreat that got a top that used Red Resonator, the last slot in this list, to combo with either Flame Bufferlo or Lady Debug. Still, with all that said, Rekindling also never managed to see play in this deck. Most people who would have played with or against Salamangreat have probably never seen either Fennec or Coyote, since they're not very good cards. And even if Fowl has seen a little bit of play to enable rank 4 plays, it's still often a 1-of at best. Rekindling also clashes with the way Salamangreat was generally played, which is a control deck that focuses on recycling their 2 archetypal traps, Rage and Roar, as disruptions. So there was never any reason to run this unsearchable card that doesn't do anything for strategies besides make you play into Nibiru harder, which is one of the biggest counters to the deck already. And coming at number 6, we have Infernoble Knight Renaud. This is a level 1 Fire Warrior that can special summon itself from your hand if you control another Fire Warrior, and when summoned this way, it's treated as a tuner. Then, if this card is special summoned, you can target a Fire Warrior or equip spell that is banished or in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. Renaud was an amazing extended Infernoble decks when those were still a thing. It synergizes extremely well with Isolde Two Tails of Noble Knights, since it can send an equip spell from your deck to the graveyard to search out a Renaud from the deck, and it'll instantly get back that spell to your hand. The fact that it special summons itself as a tuner from the hand was quite relevant as well, since those decks wanted to go through both Isolde and Christian Halki Firebrax for their combos, and this card by itself works for either. The Infernoble archetype also has a couple of other rekindling targets in the deck, such as Astolfo and Charos. Additionally, Sublation Knight, a decent 1-card Isolde with Squeak Knight, also happens to be a valid target for the card. So with all that said, why didn't Infernobles play Rekindling? Well, since out of all of those, Renaud was probably the only one that you'd want to bring back with the card. Astolfo was either a 1-of or cut entirely. Charos is a card you wanted to end on, not use as an extender. And finally, Sublation Knight, while decent, is just a much worse version of Neospace and Connector, which does the same thing but also gets you a hand rip with Aqua Dolphin in the process. Rekindling wouldn't be the worst card to play, but due to the way the deck works, comboing through just Halki Firebrax or Isolde, you'd much better off running a more consistent extender such as Monster Reborn or just more Fire Warrior monsters. In either case, due to the eventual banning of Link Cross and Smoke Grenade of the Thief, this deck isn't nearly as competitive as it once was and sees little play in today's meta. And at number 5, we have Flamvell Firedog. This is a level 4 1900 attack beatstick that can special summon another fire monster with 200 defense or less from your deck, except itself when it destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. Firedog is probably much worse than all the other cards in this list, but ranks as high because from now on we'll be talking about cards that actually saw competitive play together with Rekindling. This card was used as an engine in some decks together with Flamvell Magician for easy synchro plays, since it had enough attack to beat over just about any normal symbol threats in the meta at the time. You'd then get to bring out the Tuner Magician from the deck for level 8 synchro plays, giving you easy access to huge threats such as Stardust Dragon and Thought Ruler Archfiend. Some lists used to run Flamvell Archer as well, enabling you to make Black Rose Dragon for Field Nuke too. This engine also had natural synergy with other really popular cards for back then, in Raikou, Lightsworn Hunter, and Card Trooper, since it'd fill up your graveyard with even more fodder for when you drew Rekindling. This was the first deck to utilize the card really well, in a manner similar to Soul Charge, since it allowed you to end on multiple high-level synchros, something which was pretty difficult to do at the time. These kinds of decks weren't the best of their type, and there were multiple ways to stop a Firedog due to how abundant battle traps were back in the day. But it is still a threat to be aware of. It struggled a bit with the inherent brickiness of running Rekindling, which would be dead for the first few turns of the game, and the targets for Firedog, which weren't good to draw. Outside the Synchro era, this card would go on to see play once rank 4s got really good, since it lets you toolbox between Synchros and those. And coming in number 4, we have Laval Volcano Handmaiden. This is a level 1 Pyro Tuner with the effect that when sent to the graveyard, if you have another Laval monster in your graveyard, you can send another Laval monster from your deck to the graveyard. The Lavals are a series of mostly fire-type monsters that want to be in the graveyard. Its best monster, Laval Chain, was much better used in just about every other deck at the time. The deck was made with Rekindling in mind, having many monsters with iconic 200 stat defense lines and ways to load up the graveyard. Molten Conduction Field, their archetypal double Foolish Burial, could be used to quickly make the card live by sending a random Laval in Handmaiden, which would trigger to send another Laval to the graveyard. Since Handmaiden can send itself, you could then dump all of them from the deck and then just another Laval. So you'd get 5 monsters in the graveyard for just 1 card in your starting hand. The other Lavals of choice to dump were usually Laval Magma Cannoneer, simply due to being a level 4 for extra plays, or Laval Lakeside Lady, another tuner which could also be used as spell trap card removal in the graveyard. The deck did struggle with consistency reasons a lot, due to most monsters wanted to be in the graveyard and not in the hand. but it made up for it with its really explosive pushes. TG Hyper Librarian lets you plus even harder off of your plays, since it makes you draw a card every time you synchro summon. The deck was notable for having lines into shooting Quasar Dragon, which could easily win games by itself back then. But still, with all that said, it was never that big of a thing in the meta. Having your whole deck be built around an unsearchable spell card, even if it's a 3 of, means you'll be losing pretty much all games in which you don't find it. And now for number 3, we have Fire King Avatar Barong. This is a level 4 Beast Warrior with 1800 attack. It can special summon itself from the hand if a face-up Fire King monster you control is destroyed by card effect. Also, during the next standby phase, after this card was destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, it lets you add a Fire King card from your deck to your hand. The Fire King archetype was a series of fire monsters that all had great floating effects when destroyed by card effect. This strategy actually had a lot going for it, which led to it seeing a decent amount of competitive play as a control deck. The main monsters, Barong and Yugioh, are both Beast Warriors, which means it could utilize the Rhoda for the type in 10 key. This also meant that the deck was really good at utilizing Coat Soldier Wolfbark, which could reborn a Beast Warrior on summon, allowing for easy rank 4 plays. It may not sound like much these days, but back then that was enough to land Wolfbark on the limited list for a while. Their boss monster Garunix came back during the standby phase after being destroyed by a card effect, and then Darkhold the field. It was easy to bring out due to its archetypal E-Telly and Onslaught of the Fire Kings. This deck would play Rekindling for big pluses a la Soul Charge without the downsides, since the deck's main monsters were valid targets. Unfortunately though, Rekindling would get limited while this deck was in the meta, and not because it was too good in Fire Kings. The archetype would fall off the meta completely with the years, mostly because of power creep and not the limitation of the card though. Until a few years later, where people would splash their newest piece of support, Fire King Island and Cosmo decks, since it was one of the few cards that could destroy their ships from the hand to trigger their floating effects. And at number 2, we have Infernoid Decatron. This is the 4th level 1 fire tuner on this list, and it's a fiend type monster. Its effect is that when it's normal or special summoned, it lets you send another Infernoid monster from your deck or hand to the graveyard to have this card gain that monster's level, and then replace its name and effect with that said monster's effect. Decatron is the only normal summon the Infernoid archetype has, and it does everything for the deck. The Infernoids all love being in the graveyard, since they can special summon themselves from there, and also need more Infernoid names in the graveyard to use as fodder. These decks would often max out on all sorts of mill effects, such as Reasoning, Monster Gate, and even Lightsworn engines. So of course Decatron's Foolish Burial effect is highly appreciated. Not only does Decatron let you get the effects of the big Infernoids that need multiple banishes to summon themselves, it also lets you get around the restrictions shared by all the Infernoids. Every one of them except this card can't be special summoned unless the total levels and ranks of all monsters you control is 8 or lower, and Decatron can skirt around that since it won't gain that effect until after it's already on the field. Infernoids were quite a popular option for years leading up to the Link era, being usually combined with either the aforementioned Lightsworns or Burning Abyss. It fell off a bit with power creep, but ended up becoming a solid rogue pick again with the introduction of Layer of Darkness, which lets your Infernoids now tribute your opponent's monsters for cost. Rekindling saw a little bit of play, mostly in early versions, and only at one since it was limited at the time. Even with Decatron as the only target in the entire deck, it wasn't too unlikely you'd get to it eventually. And if you ever got multiple of them in the graveyard, you'd get to abuse the effect not being a once per turn. This was the last time Rekindling saw competitive play, even if it stayed limited all the way until 2019. And finally at number 1, we have Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Spirit, a level 3 Beast Warrior which cannot be used as a synchro material except for the summon of a Beast Warrior monster. When it's normal summon, it lets you special summon a level 3 fire monster with 200 or less defense from your graveyard, and then locks you from attacking for the rest of the turn except with Beast Warrior type monsters. This card got itself on the limited list extremely quickly when it was released due to how good its effect was in Fire Fist strategies. Back in the day, Fire Fist decks would be built in a couple of different ways, either focusing on mostly the level 3s or the level 4s that the archetype had. The 3-axis version of the deck is widely believed the main reason why Konami finally went ahead and limited Rekindling, leaving it on the list for several years after. Despite only really playing 3 targets for the deck, in Spirit, Leopard, and Lion Emperor, the unparalleled consistency offered by Tenki and Bears made most of these max out copies of Rekindling anyway. Soul Charge hadn't been released yet, but that card filled pretty much the same role within the deck, except with no battle phase restriction or life point costs. With Rekindling, you could fill up the field with both level 6 synchros and rank 3 Xyz plays, getting you even more advantage. The card got limited shortly after this variant started getting popular, but that wouldn't kill the deck anyways. Fire Fists were incredibly powerful for the time still, even with 2 of their biggest bombs, Rekindling and Spirit, at 1 copy. The deck continued to get a few tops here and there until the end of 2014, where it began to be phased out of the meta. By that point, Fire Fist was already being ran mostly as an advantage engine in other decks, which would just play Bear and sometimes a copy of Gorilla as well. The archetype would eventually get a 4th Rekindling target in Ram as well, but that was already too deep into the Link era to have been any relevant. No competitive deck ever utilized Rekindling as well as this one did, while also not being completely reliant to play the game. It was able to take advantage of it being at 3, even if for a short period of time, and that is why this card is the best Rekindling target to have ever saw play in the game. Alright, and that's the list. If you happen to know of any other cards we may have missed or have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.